Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wine Business Institute at Sonoma State University. And today we have an opportunity to talk with the editor of the Wine Business Journal, Sergio. Please tell us the latest news. We have a special issue that's just been published and a top paper that was selected.
Thanks, Ray. Yes, we have a special issue that is coming out in 3 weeks, and some of the papers are already published. And we're pleased to announce the winners of the Best Paper Award for the special issue. It was a difficult decision to make because all the papers were really good. We had a lot of really good submissions.
Wow. So tell us about the special issue. It's a big process.
It is a long process, as you mentioned. We started in November of 2020. For many years, we have been intrigued by the innovation phenomenon in the wine industry. Like, how is it different from other industries? Because the wine industry is an industry of tradition and prestige and luxury sometimes, but there can be a lot of innovation that occurs, and perhaps many of us are not aware of that. So we wanted to understand it and how it works across the different sectors that the wine industry tends to occupy. We put out a call for submissions, and we started by asking people to submit a one-page abstract proposal of what they wanted to study. A month after that, we provided feedback and requested them to submit the full paper by June 30th of this year.
And then these two articles that made it to the top, the cream that rose to the top.
These two really aligned with the goal of the special issue, which was to understand innovation in the wine industry. In the first one is the first meta-analysis or empirical review of the role of innovation in the wine industry and its link with firm performance. And the second one was a literature review of the most up-to-date methods for measuring consumer emotions and using that information as a measure of wine quality. And we really felt that that was a very informative piece, but most importantly, a piece that describes some of the more groundbreaking research and that will be the future of the wine business literature.
Interesting. And so the top paper, what set it apart and what's special about it?
That was a decision that was made through the votes of the board of directors of the Wine Business Institute. And the reason for that is that a meta-analysis, Ray, involves a massive amount of work. It involves countless hours of scouring every academic database that you can get your hands on for papers that study innovation in the wine industry. So how do you find those papers, right? You find them by searching for keywords like innovation and wine, and innovation and wine industry sustainability. So various keywords that are used to find these papers. Based on those keywords, initially they found a pool of 156 manuscripts. They brought it down to 76 articles that qualified. But these authors, Ray, they really went above and beyond a meta-analysis, because not only did they find a lot of studies on this topic, and remember, the wine business literature is vast, the authors say, yet studies focused on innovation were very difficult to find. What was impressive about their study is that they not only did an empirical review, which is what the blue bars show, but they also did a qualitative review, or a review of papers that were both conceptual and empirical, because they wanted to know what researchers also focus on most of the time. The reason why this paper was selected as the best paper was because it really provided a very complete picture of innovation in the wine industry that we did not have before. We did not really understand innovation as an intersectoral phenomenon in the wine industry, in which innovation occurs more often in some of the sectors than it does in the other sectors. And I'll go into more detail in that regard. But the reason why I mention that is because you can see how green or eco-innovation is the most commonly studied type of innovation, followed by product innovation. And we can see like green or eco-innovation mainly happens in agriculture, wine growing, and manufacturing, winemaking. Product innovation mainly happens in winemaking, manufacture, right? Marketing innovation is mainly in sales. But I won't bore you with all of these variables and their definitions, but all you have to know, Ray, is that technology adoption in this study was mainly about wine machinery, biotechnologies, biosensors, and winemaking techniques, right? Sustainable practices had a lot to do with, yes, something in procurement like environmental purchasing policy, but mostly it was about collecting data related to ecological issues, strategic goals for reducing waste and carbon emissions. So it was mainly about agriculture, but also about manufacturing primarily, right? And why is this important? Because what the authors found was that innovation, the strongest predictor of innovation in the wine industry is sustainable practices. So sustainable practices have forced the wine industry to do things differently. They have to change their practices so they can be sustainable. And in the process, that has perhaps led them to question some of the other things that they're doing, right? Maybe we don't need to do all of these other things, or maybe that can be done differently. So, in going above and beyond the regulatory requirements for sustainability, the wine industry really, perhaps unknowingly so, they made themselves more innovative and therefore more resilient. And the second area that was a pretty strong predictor of winery innovation is technology adoption and sustainable and absorptive capacity. Technology adoption is mainly, like we said, about the machinery adopting new techniques of production. So it has a lot to do with manufacture. But that doesn't mean that there is no technology adoption in marketing or in agriculture. And in terms of the absorptive capacity, that means the knowledge that the firm has and how it's able to use knowledge and use it to create commercially viable revenue generating products or services. So the main takeaway from the meta-analysis, and the reason why I have been talking about the intersectoral differences and why I have been saying this is about agriculture, this is about manufacturing, this is about sales, is because what we now know after doing this study that we did not know before was that after looking at all the empirical evidence that has been produced, we realized that agriculture is where most of the innovation happens in the wine industry. And that is perhaps a reasonable finding, given that the wine industry has a very, very close connection to the soil. And therefore, they have gone way beyond regulatory requirements for sustainability. As you know, in Sonoma by now, almost 100% of the wineries have met the goals of sustainability. Similar movements happened in Spain and in Italy and many other countries. And we see that that also has forced some changes in practices in manufacture so that a product can be sustainable. We know that a lot of the innovation that happens in the wine industry is incremental and based on having better methods of production that provide some improvement, but not a radical improvement. But the biggest surprise was that the wine industry has lagged in terms of innovation in sales, innovation in hospitality. That is surprising because I think if I were to ask a lot winery owners or winery executives, they would say we are really innovative in terms of sales methods and practices. But we do know that the pandemic led to a lot of innovation in sales, more than perhaps any period during the last 30 years. So perhaps this has evened out. And remember, this meta-analysis looks at evidence from 1991 to 2019, right? So it provides a pre-pandemic kind of picture of the industry across many countries, not just the US.
Certainly, we've seen it in the local region here. The wine growers, people with vineyards, people in winemaking, wineries have all adopted sustainability. And the research really underscores that, right? It's been an important initiative for many involved, not only for doing the right thing, the moral imperative, but also as agriculture is a long-term game and people think about succession planning, they plant a vineyard and build a winery and pass it on to their next generation. They want things to be sustainable, sustainable on the land, in production, and then also as a business. And we value that, of course, at the Wine Business Institute, building sustainable wine businesses, that three-legged stool. It's very important.
And I'm so glad that you brought up the intent to pass the winery to the next generation. And because about 90% of California wineries are family owned and family managed. Definitely, this research does create that research question about what role does the fact that most wineries are family owned and managed play in this. And definitely, I think your insight is spot on. I definitely think that there are some dynamics that occur when there's succession, and the second generation and later generations, they may be more focused on process innovation, establishing policies in the HR policies, and having an organization that is more formal and that can have better margins, more efficient. But definitely, we see that the founders have that entrepreneurial mindset that is composed of risk taking, of proactiveness, and perhaps these dynamics are definitely things that we want to study. The reason why I bring it up is because there is a paper in this special issue that goes over all of that, the role of familyness in innovation in the wine industry. With that, I wanna close by saying that the other paper that was nominated for the award, we determined that it was so groundbreaking that we decided to use it as the foundation for our research agenda for next year. And as we have learned through some recent research, the concept of customer satisfaction is outdated. It doesn't predict sales. What predicts sales in wine is going to be emotions, is going to be loyalty, is going to be what people felt during the experience. And remember, these experiences are happening virtually more and more often these days. So emotions remains a very important and sensory perception, as people are maybe don't experience the winery in person anymore.
Could I ask you a question to help me understand it, Sergio? So you said customer satisfaction may be passé as a measure, but wouldn't a positive emotional experience be part of customer satisfaction, or are these very different things as you slice them up?
That's an excellent question. When we are dealing with customer satisfaction, it's about whether the person had an interaction that was free of negative connotations and an interaction that was perhaps pleasant and perhaps agreeable. Now, when we talk about emotions, we're talking about much more stronger feelings. We're talking about anger, we're talking about excitement, we're talking about that they don't just like the winery, they love the winery. They love what it represents, they defend it, they believe the winery is going through a tough time. So there's the sense of loyalty and engagement. The research shows that it really is not a predictor of sales and customers' willingness to pay, as it perhaps may have been, because it is a strong component of wine business theory. And perhaps it is time to move on to different approaches that elicit stronger responses from customers and that create loyalty and attachment and a sense of connection. In terms of the experiences, it has to do with the emotions that it awakens and perhaps the feelings that it brings, a hedonic kind of experience at the winery, which goes beyond simply being dissatisfied or satisfied. And the idea is that you don't want happy customers. You want customers that either love it or dislike it, right? But happy customers will not drive sales. They will not champion your brand, and they will not be the ones to tell their friends about you and buy multiple cases per year. For your question, I think it's spot on, and it makes us think about the practical implications of what we do. And I think that's so important because we can lose track, getting lost in the conceptual world of ideas. So if I may close this presentation by thanking Ron Rubin and the Ron Rubin Winery for letting us use the photos of their breathtaking winery, which has beautiful feng shui design. And I've caught multiple people with this background photo. So definitely I'm not the only person that is in love with how that winery looks. Thanks so much for your time this afternoon. And I hope that you can check out our special issue when it comes out in 3 weeks from now.
Sergio, thank you so much for all that you do to organize the journal, to promote the journal, and to share it with the rest of the wine industry and our colleagues in academia. It's part of our mission to do this type of work.